Chuck, obviously the consequences of your choice led to pretty dire results. So how did those results come about?
Well, obviously, if you make a series of unethical choices, an unethical choice or a series of them in my case, it's like creating a house of cards. And eventually that house of cards will collapse. And that's in reality what happened to me. In 1990, I was teaching a continuing professional education course to a group of CPAs. In this case, it happened to be in Boise, Idaho. And it was 8 hours worth of tax law, which most people would say is kind of boring. Oh, yeah, stimulating. I mean, so we would do some fun things, like have tax sing along, tax returns, money on the way. We fill out the messy forms, but the clients have to pay. I mean, things like that,
Okay.
Something to add a little humor to it. But at break, at lunch, when I stepped outside, there was a note on the door that said, while you're out, call your office ASAP.
Days before cell phones.
Days before cell phones, right. Telephone banks in the lobby areas and calling cards and so forth. And so I was kind of hungry. It was Mountain Time versus East Coast time. But nonetheless, I thought, well, I'll go ahead and call the office. And Kelly, when I did, I got one of my partners on the line, and he said to me, he says, Chuck, he said, I know you're going to be back in a couple of days. I can't keep up with your schedule, but one of the clients that you have invested money for, they've had a change of circumstance, and they need to go ahead and liquidate that investment ASAP. If you'll tell me where the file is, I'll be happy to help you take care of that. Now, the reality was, I knew, and God knew, the truth. The truth was I had not invested that client's money. I had stolen it. So at that moment, I knew that the card was being pulled from the house of cards, and it was like this slow motion experience of watching the house of cards collapse and knowing that there was no way to fix this, to change it. It was a reaction that was taking place that I had no control over. So I had to go back home and tell my partners and tell my wife and family that despite all the legitimate success, I was a liar and a thief. Now, let me say this to you, and I want to be real clear with this. What I'm getting ready to tell you doesn't make my actions right. They weren't. But I admitted to my wife, I admitted to my partners, I admitted to the clients that I had stolen money from what had taken place. And I made restitution. With the help of family and friends, I legitimately was able to make restitution to those people that I had defrauded. And in all candor, they rather would have had their money back than me in jail. Now, of course, as most people watching this training program could understand, I lost my license as a CPA, I lost my partnership, I lost my job, I lost fundamentally all earthly possessions in an effort to liquidate, to be able to make restitution. So life dramatically changed. And the impact of that became, while all of the consequences, the pretty quick and immediate consequences took place, the local prosecutor did not want to prosecute. He felt like I had experienced enough. And the people from whom I embezzled money, they were inclined to not want to prosecute. So in early 1991, when the process really was unfolding and I was working to make restitution, life dramatically changed. Restitution was made, and I was in this phase of believing, okay, well, life's going to start again, so to speak. Well, that was true until mid to late summer of 91, when there was this knock on the door. And I went to the door and looked through the little peephole, and there were these two guys on the outside, and they were dressed fairly nice, and I thought, well, it's either somebody selling something or someone handing out religious tracts. But, why would somebody be at the door? So I opened the door and hi, and they said, "Are you Charles Gallagher?" Now, I'm from the Southeast, and probably most people watching this can detect the Southern accent. And in the Southeast, if you're called by your Christian name, you're in trouble. I mean, if you're William
Right.
Robert and you're out playing and everybody knows him as Billy Bob, that's fine. But when Mama says, Billy Bob, you get yourself in here right now, you're in trouble.
It's the same way in other places too.
Okay. So when they said, are you Charles Gallagher? I had this sinking feeling that there was a problem. And I said, yes, I am. And they reach in their pocket and they pull out these beautiful gold badges. One person was from the Department of Labor. It seems he was with the Criminal Investigation Division of the Department of Labor, and he was interested in my prosecution because of ERISA violations. Seems
Explain what
the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. What governs retirement plans? And it seems that one of the clients I embezzled money from was from their retirement plan. Speaking of which, I used to teach courses on retirement plans, so I guess one might say karma's kind of tough. The other guy was from the Internal Revenue Service. Again, beautiful badge. Criminal Investigation Division. He wanted to talk to me about the fact that I had not paid taxes on stolen money. Kelly, it never crossed my mind to pay taxes on stolen money.
Right,
I mean,
right.
1040, line 37, other income, stolen money.
Yeah.
That never crossed my mind. So here I am teaching courses on retirement plans and being tax partner in a CPA firm, and the Criminal Investigation Division of two branches of the federal government wanted to prosecute me. Now, I can't tell you exactly why this is, because sometimes in life there are miracles that take place, but they were intent on prosecuting me toward the end of 1991. But for whatever reason, decided they would defer that prosecution to give me an opportunity to legitimately pay the bank back, since that's the fundamental source from which the restitution took place. So, I began working to do that, and in the late, I guess we'd call it 1994, I got the notice, 3 years had passed, that deferred prosecution was up and it was time for me to plead guilty to tax evasion and embezzlement. And I did, to be told then that sentencing would follow.
So what were you expecting? I mean, you had, obviously you'd broken the law, but you had paid restitution for the monies you'd stolen. So what were you expecting in the process?
Well, to be honest with you, I was hoping that they would look to see I had no criminal record. It was a first offense, not that it was a smart
Just
offense,
one,
but
yeah.
but it was no criminal record, first offense, had lived a clean life, had made restitution, so surely after I pled guilty, the judge would consider probation. That's what I was hoping for.
And what happened?
In June of 1995, I stood before the judge. There were character witnesses there. They were talking about the clean life that I lived and why I should receive probation. And it was a very short hearing. Then the judge looked at me, gavel fell, sentenced 18 months active, 3 years probation. We will tell you when to report. And so, as I said, on October 2nd, 1995, I took 23 steps from the curb into the front doors of federal prison, and at that point became 11/6/42/058.
So how did you feel when the judge sentenced you to prison?
I was stunned. I fully expected that I would receive probation. That was my expectation. But I will say to you, as stunned as I was, I prepared as best I could my two children for the fact that Dad would be away, that in Christmas of 1995, for the first time in their life, I would not be there. And understood that there must be a reason for what's taking place. And I will say to you, prison was really unpleasant. There was nothing fun about it. But the fact of the matter is, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So I came clearly to understand that every choice has a consequence. And while those consequences may vary in scope or in intensity, the fact is, if bad choices can yield some pretty negative consequences, then the other thing that became crystal clear for me in prison is if I make a different set, a more empowering set of choices, then the consequences that follow could be outstanding.
Well, let's talk a little more about some of the consequences. Obviously, we know about the prison term, but what happened in your personal life?
Well, the most challenging day that I think I really ever faced, short of the day when I knew that this illusion was collapsing, was when I had to face my wife and tell her that this life that we lived, this experience that we had, really was based on an illusion, and that a good part of what I had created was nothing more than based on lies and theft. And as challenging as it was, we tried to make the marriage work. But sometimes the choices we make have what I'm going to refer to as unintended consequences. The reality is, both with the clients I stole from, but more importantly with the person who was most significant in my life, I broke trust. And what I've come to understand is when you break trust, it becomes incredibly difficult to regain that, to rebuild that, to get it back to a firm foundation that the relationship can continue. So as much as we tried, the challenge became maintaining the relationship. And unfortunately, that did not survive. My marriage failed. However, to the testament and credit of my now ex-wife, she wanted me to be a good father to my children. And that opened the door for me to have a wonderful relationship with my two sons. And I made the commitment to them that I would be totally transparent. And that transparency has paid off, because the relationship that I have with my two sons is absolutely outstanding. And it's based on the fact that I'm willing to be totally honest and allow that honesty to create that foundation of trust.
So we're talking about the choices, we're talking about the consequences, and clearly you didn't want to be sentenced to prison, but you said it was the best thing that happened to you. Yet you lost your freedom, you lost your wife. How did those two fit together?
Well, I have come to believe that we all will attract to us in our lives those things we need to learn the lessons perhaps that we came here to learn. And in my case, what I know is I didn't want to be sentenced to prison, but yet it is the best thing that ever happened to me. I needed that finality to really gain and learn the lesson. Had that not happened, the likelihood would have been I would have learned the lesson of, yes, there are choices and consequences and thou shalt not steal kind of thing, but I would have skated past the big consequence. And in my case, I didn't. And so I understand at this point in time that the consequences that take place in life, in many cases, are the kinds of things that we need. We may not want, but we will get what we need.
What would you share with the viewers, with the audience here? What can we learn from what happened to you?
Well, I think the one thing that is really profound, and this came up for me in 2006, 10 years following prison, was people would continue to ask me, well, wait a minute, how is it you're a convicted felon and also a senior VP of sales and marketing in a public company? And the answer to the question is every choice has a consequence. And if people walked away from this training course understanding choices and consequences, my life demonstrates that bad choices yield some pretty negative consequences. It also shows that positive choices create results that can be highly profound. And I like to say to people, you're not defined by the choices of your past. The past is part of who I am. I am a convicted felon, and I can't change that. But I'm not defined by being a convicted felon. I'm defined, and the future I create is based on the choices that I make today. And I think for people to understand the simplicity of how easy it is to start down that slippery slope and that there will be consequences that follow, at least help us understand on a conscious level, I need to really be careful about the choices that I make.